Wonderful. Well, so great to have you all with us today. I spoke to many of you prior to today to hear firsthand about your own experiences with the talent crunch, and I know it's something that everyone watching virtually and in the room has faced as well. So I wanted to start by just giving everyone a little bit of background on yourselves. So please just take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourself, talk a bit about your background, and we will then dive into the topic. So I will start with Gordon.
Great.
Should be able to.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my name is Gordon Chiu. I am a Senior Director of Software Engineering with Intel PSG, which is the FPGA, Field Programmable Gate Array portion of Intel. I've been in the FPGA industry for 18 years. I joined Altera 18 years ago. We were acquired by Intel in 2015, and I've played a role in leading many different parts of the FPGA technology, ranging from EDA CAD to IP design, chip design, platform design, and most recently I lead a global team that builds tools to enable FPGA designers to build our silicon. And I'm also the site lead for our downtown Toronto campus and playing a huge role in all the tech crunch challenges that we have today.
Wonderful, thank you, Gordon. Shelley, I'll pass it on to you. Should be on, hopefully. I cannot yet, but
Can?
yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
All good.
Sit down. I'm gonna talk quiet. Hi, I'm Shelley Kuipers, co-founder of the 51. We are like one part venture fund, one part community, and I'm one of 3 co-founders of the 51. But my background and experience leading to this, I've had the opportunity of like founding or co-founding companies, some successfully, some not successful. As well as being an early stage investor since 2001. My very first investment was in a company called Solium. We sold to Morgan Stanley in 2019 for $1.1 billion. And so we got in on the ground floor there at that company. Today, I run a family office with my 2 adult sons, 32 and 26, with my husband. And at the 51, we've activated 18 million in private capital for 29 companies. We have more than 160 limited partners across the country. To date, we've largely invested women's capital, so we're explicitly inviting women to the table to become venture investors, investing in women-led companies. But we're expanding the scope of one of our funds, Food and Ag Tech, where we're investing in, what we say is outliers, so all aspects of diversity. And so, we're kind of transitioning from individual capital, family office, family foundations, and now we have an institutional lead with our Food and Ag Tech fund.
Good. Thank you, Shelley. And as the female founder of a company that has pitched many male investors, I welcome more women investing in female-led companies. So thank you for all the work you do there. Nizar, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Nizar Rida. I immigrated to Canada 30 years, actually, last week, exactly 30 years. Live in Ottawa, grew up in UK and Ireland, and then moved here. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I worked for 3 years for Nortel when I came in, and then I started 3 successful startups from the ground up, built them with I was lucky to have a very strong team and a very strong partner. We built 3 teams. We sold 3 companies. The last one was Rianta Solutions, was acquired by Marvell on January 18th this year. So I run the Marvell operation. We have 3 offices across Canada, and I was tasked to build and grow the team here, double in size and build cool technologies for Marvell to sell.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Chris, tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Chris Smith. I'm Corporate Vice President for Platform Software at AMD. And the way to think about that is you've got the hardware at the bottom and then the lowest layers of software and firmware on top of that in terms of enabling the silicon and the various ecosystems we play in. That's my mandate and responsibility across the whole spectrum. So everything from Xboxes, PlayStations to Teslas and laptops and big servers in the cloud. We lay a common foundation of software that enables all of that in the various ecosystems. So Windows, Android, Linux, Chrome. And have a very big presence here in Markham in Toronto and around the world. And so very excited to hear from other panelists and talk about this crunch for talent, because I think we're all feeling it.
Yeah, and I love the diversity of backgrounds we have on the panel. We have folks that are putting money into the ecosystem and have portfolio companies that are facing talent crunches. We have folks that larger companies building presences here. And of course, we have the entrepreneurs who have built and sold companies. So, Gordon, I want to start with you. Thank you for those wonderful introductions. You lead a global team and you're driving the recruiting and hiring efforts for Intel in Toronto. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen in terms of trends through COVID, and then also the impact of the attrition to the major tech companies, the FANGs of the world, and how that's impacted Intel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. COVID's been such a disruptive force in tech talent in the last few years, and I wouldn't be saying anything that surprises anyone here, right? With COVID, there's been that vanishing of that barrier to remote work, remote sites. Now companies like Intel are going and getting talent anywhere they can around the world, and we don't really care about geography anymore. It's a fantastic time to be a tech employee, but it's extremely challenging to be a tech employer. I would even argue that for hardware and semiconductor spaces, it's even harder, because if you look at how hardware talent is developed, right? It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of specialty, a lot of expertise. We recruit in hardware and semiconductor engineering out of specific schools. For example, in FPGAs, we go after a U of T FPGA research lab, and that's where a lot of our talent comes from. So because hardware talent is so geographic in nature, and it grows up through a local center of excellence. Like if you look at the Toronto area, there's a lot of work being done here in graphics and transceiver IPs and FPGAs, and it takes many decades of work before that talent can get to that experience level. And if you look at what happened with COVID, now that talent is given an abundance of opportunities. They can work remotely for any company, and we're losing a lot of our experienced hardware talent to software companies who are able to pick up this talent and take their transferable skill set and put them to use. And the real challenge for employers like Intel is, yes, we can go and hire remote talent, but that remote talent is sort of generalist in nature, and it's not as specialized as that local bred hardware talent that we've built over many, many decades with other companies. So you have this challenge where you're replacing experienced talent with generalist talent, and it's challenging for any company that's trying to build innovative products. And the real way to tackle that problem, I think, is to build that pipeline earlier through universities and high schools to develop that talent pipeline for what you need in the future.
Thanks, Gordon. I know that's something we're going to touch on a little bit later. And you said something interesting, which is it's a great time to be an employee in tech. And it's funny because a lot of folks would say the opposite right now. They'd say it's a scary time to be an employee in tech, especially today. 13% of Meta's workforce was laid off. Now, a lot of these layoffs are happening in the software industry, not necessarily the hardware side, but I think everyone is a bit nervous. Employers are nervous about the ability to attract and retain talent and the competitive nature of competing with the big FANG companies, but employees are nervous as well. They're nervous to even take a job in tech right now. At least that's the sentiment I'm hearing from my employees and their peers. Chris, you're at a big company as well. How do you see the competition with the FANGs of the world, and what's the sentiment you're hearing on the ground about the desire to work in tech at a time like this?
Yeah, great question. And I should give you a little more background just for context on my response. But prior to AMD, I did a pretty long stint at BlackBerry. Prior to BlackBerry, I did a pretty long stint at Nortel. So you see where I'm going with this. I've seen a few ups and downs and gyrations in the tech industry, and so yeah, as employers, I mean, we're hearing the same concerns and fears from our employees. And I mean, what I always focus on, whether it's with a new grad or a student or somebody wanting to get in tech or somebody who's maybe seasoned but they haven't been through the ups and downs, is it's really about the work you're doing and the skill set that you're building and the relationships you're building. If you're working on incredibly innovative technology at the cutting edge and building those skills, deepening your understanding and your knowledge, whether it's through research in a university or in a startup or in a big company, you are insulating yourself against these gyrations in the market. So, I mean, we know that these are temporary. There's so much going on. There's so much potential, and kind of all the companies represented here are looking at future and have big plans to kind of invest. So we'll weather the storm, and we'll kind of pull through, and that's what I think really helps people to feel better about continuing in tech or getting into tech, knowing that if you make that investment, it is going to pay off.
Yes, my mom also worked at Nortel for 30 years, and we always joke that we would have a family cottage if she had taken her stock options out earlier. So moving on, Nizar, so when we chatted prior to the panel, you talked about how you had built and sold several companies to multinationals, and mentioned that 20% of your team at Marvell in Canada comes from abroad via intercompany transfers.
Yeah.
It's something Gordon talked about, hiring international talent and Canada's unique position to be able to do that. Can you speak a bit about the difference between the Canadian and international talent pools and the challenges of hiring internationally?
It's training. By the way, on the ups and downs, we've been through it before. We're going to go through it again. The difference this time around, honestly, it's a genuine growth. 2001 was a completely different game. 2008 was, housing crisis. 2001, it's the dot-com era. 2000 and whatever it is, 2020, 22, 23, there is a genuine growth in the industry. So, it's a very, very interesting dynamics. Although inflation and headwinds, there is a genuine growth in automobile, in 5G wireless, in data centers. So I don't think these technology evolution is not going to go away. And we're going to see this as a blip when we look back a few years back. Going back to your question, we've kind of taken steps a few years back, and we've seen the math didn't work. There is a growth. Obviously, COVID introduced a big issue for us. A lot of companies, we used to go and try to deal with them. They go, we don't want to deal with remote. We want everything local. COVID opened it up, and they say, oh, the model works now. Let's go. And we've all seen that, an invasion of big companies coming into Toronto, to Ottawa, grabbing key talents. So we've seen this trend earlier, and we started putting a program in place. So we had a very, very good co-op programs, and we had a very good training for people coming from abroad. So we invested in people, and we said, you know what? We take students at grade, some second year, third year. We've taken actually students from grade 12 as well, just to try to see the talent and the uptick. And we put a very good program. Initially, it didn't work out well until we said, hang on a minute, we got to have people, pair people, and train these and build a bond with this stuff, because you want them to come back. You're investing in them, you're paying them money, you're training them. At the same time, they're investing in you and you're investing in them. So we built a pipeline, for the last 9 years or so. We had a track as well to bring in people in. We worked with the industry in Canada. We worked on immigration, bring in pilot, visa workers. We bring them in for 2 years. We do a lot of training for them, and then we convert them. And then, we've seen people, settling in, building families here. And certainly in our company was a good example. A number of our staff that came from abroad settled, but key in training and building the team. If you don't build the team and you don't build the bondage, whether COVID or without COVID, if you don't have that bondage with the team, you will feel a bigger headwind, when all this forces coming at you.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, my company went fully virtual during the pandemic, so I happily work in my track pants every day with a nice top on. And but we bring the team together twice a year for in-person retreats, because you really can't replace, as we're seeing today, except those of you who are joining virtually. We appreciate that you're joining from home, but those who are in person, those face-to-face connections really do matter. So it's a great point, Nizar. Shelley, you work with a lot of portfolio companies, so your perspective is a little bit different in that, when you look to talent acquisition for your family office, you look to your family, which is very strategic. But when you look at your portfolio companies, what are the biggest challenges that they're coming to you with when it comes to attracting talent, and also just kind of this remote/hybrid culture, and how to kind of shepherd their teams through that?
Yeah, I think there isn't like a single answer to all of this, right? So like we know that we keep swinging the pendulum around. Everyone to the office. Okay, no, you can work from anywhere. Okay, no, it's a hybrid. Okay, no, we really want everyone back. Like, it's just like, I don't know if that's sustainable. I think what's most important is you create a culture that's highly productive, and that everyone on the team is very motivated to contribute to the company. And so I think every company has to design what that unique culture is and then stick with it and lead that culture. But on the portfolio company side, it's a very interesting time. Like we said, there's these massive layoffs in tech, but we also have companies in our portfolio that are massively growing and they can't find the people. And we know the majority of our companies are based in Canada. We do invest in US companies too, but the US comes up north, they grab people, then we don't have people in our own communities that we can recruit. And so it just becomes like this catch-22 all the time. It's that you're always like a step behind. I think for Canadian companies, there's two key aspects. We really need to focus on the development of our intellectual property, and make sure that we are creating products and services that are defensible and highly differentiated in the marketplace. But we also need the ability to commercialize. And I think that's where we can really shine, is by growing and nurturing commercialization talent at home so that we are not reliant on other markets to bring that talent to us. And I would say that that's what we're consistently seeing in our portfolio companies, is they have the best idea, they have the best product, it's differentiated in the market, but it's not going to mean anything if they cannot distribute that product, across Canada, across the US, and across the globe. So, we see a need for CMOs, CROs, growth leaders, anybody that has effective track records in helping these companies grow. So that would be kind of like the biggest talent gap that we're seeing right now, is like it's very hard to find effective, capable marketing talent. There's marketing talent out there, and then there's marketing talent that actually delivers results. Same thing on the sales side. And so those are the two key areas that our portfolio companies are really struggling in finding real talent that delivers real results.
Yes, as someone who's currently hiring a head of marketing and a head of sales, I absolutely see that challenge. And it's also tough, if you are a small company who is, looking within Canada and doesn't want to jump through the hoops to hire international talent at this time. It can also be a challenge. Gordon, you talked about, actually all of you have touched on the importance of getting talent young, right? So getting people interested in hardware, getting them interested in STEM. It's something that was touched on in the panel this morning. And you talked a little bit about the work that you're doing in that space. Can you share a bit more and some lessons that people can take away if they're looking at starting that recruiting well before someone graduates from university?
Yeah, you definitely have to start young. You have to start early, right? If you look at what you're taking a page from what software is doing, right? It's a matter of time before our young children are learning how to code in kindergarten, right? That's how early they're pushing the curriculum down. What we have to do is something similar in hardware and semiconductor, where we have to enable the education piece as well as the inspiring people to pursue careers in semiconductor and hardware engineering. So like some of the things that we're doing with Intel FPGA is we're building curriculum and collateral and going into universities and giving professors a course in a box to teach hardware engineering to students, so that hopefully they can come out of school knowing and having the skill set necessary to be a successful hardware engineer. We've donated boards to labs and set up 1,500 teaching labs. And I think over the last decade, we have educated about 1 million students in our FPGAs. And that's all from activity that's done from a small team in Toronto pushing this curriculum material. And then the other piece of it, I think, is inspiring our young engineering talent to go and pursue a career in hardware and semiconductor engineering, especially, I think, the underrepresented female engineering. So what we're doing there is we're partnering with some great organizations like Women in Science and Engineering at U of T, where we're actually taking our experienced senior female engineers, sending them into lower year engineering classes and having networking workshops to share about what are the career opportunities for females in computer and semiconductor engineering, resume workshops, interview workshops, and that really gives a tangible role model for young women to think about careers in hardware and semiconductors. And that's the only way to get that talent pool for the future. And we're seeing benefits from that work today as our diversity increases and as we have workforces that come in knowing our products. And that's something essentially that I think all companies need to do in order to have that local talent pool available.
Well, Gordon, I have a 1-year-old daughter, so she should get into the Intel pipeline early, right? That's what you're saying. And Nizar, you also have spearheaded some of these, STEM, getting high school students interested in STEM from an early age. Can you speak a little bit about your work at Marvell on this?
Yeah, well, I'm a father of 3 daughters, by the way. I tried to convince one of them to get into engineering. I was close, but in general, as Gordon touched, 50%, unlock that talent. This is a male-dominated profession, unfortunately. There's a lot of talented females out there, and even if we can get, Marvell, 7% female. It's that low. So our target is to go to 20. We're trying to push hard to get more females. We've got a lot more now co-op students, female co-op students from we've expanded our footprint. We focused initially on Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver. We moved out. Now it's the first time we've hired across Canada, predominantly females actually this time. We did introduce a female co-op program targeted for females. We have in every site now female site leader. We said it doesn't matter what age. If they are young and they are enthusiastic, let's just push that, and they become the ambassadors. Our focus right now, we are at an late stage in our career. So what's your legacy? Can you build the next generation leaders? Marketing, sales, increase the pool talent for females. It's extremely important. Think about it. 50% of that.
51% actually.
51. There you go. It's even more in Ottawa. Actually, I think there are more females. Yeah. So definitely, there are programs that we are targeting now. Trying to make it more interesting rather than just life sciences and arts. Life sciences, art. Certainly, my daughters went into life sciences. And if we could convert that, certainly we can unlock some of that, deadlock that we have, shortage of people. So.
Yeah. Chris, what about at AMD? What kind of programs do you have? What kind of, I know, Shelley, I'm going to get to speaking with you about your work with DE&I, but what kind of initiatives do you have for getting young, talented, interested specifically from not just women, but underrepresented backgrounds in general?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's we have a number of organizations that we work with, both in Canada and abroad, where we get engaged and involved. It could be sponsoring events for things like Go Eng Girl, where we get involved and we encourage young potential engineers to get excited about not necessarily AMD specifically, but just getting them into the technology realm. I mean, the rest it'll all pay back. In time, we have associations with African American engineers, and we work on going to campuses and working through events and staffing events and providing opportunities for them. Building relationships and building the ability for us to go and kind of share the experience of our employees and what it means to be diverse and the commitment that we have to diversity. And make sure that they understand those opportunities. So a lot of times, I mean, we invest heavily in the internship and PY programs. And when we're doing that, we're doing it both, looking at the general student population and looking at diverse student populations. And we do that through the organizations at the schools that support them. And we do that by bringing people from the company who represent those diverse backgrounds to kind of share their experiences and attract them. I mean, I think it's like, the other panelists were saying, I mean, this is a diverse workforce we know is a more productive, more engaged, more talented workforce. And so we very much are committed to driving, through these partnerships and relationships, the attraction of those people to the company.
Yeah, and you spoke about modeling, right, Chris? Modeling the leadership and showing folks that there's representation at every level. And I know when we get applicants at Willful, a lot of times they say, I'm attracted to a women-led company, and I really, attracted to the values that you promote publicly. So I think us as leaders modeling that behavior is important. And Shelley, that brings me to you, because I know you do a lot of work to increase representation, obviously encouraging more women to become investors and to be writing checks, which is amazing. But also, you won't invest in a company unless they have, in the term sheet, it says that they will commit to making diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority. So can you talk to us a little bit about the work that you're doing there and any best practices that you've learned from your work?
Yeah, and maybe I'll just highlight some statistics. Like we talked about population, 51% of the population. So definitely can be leveraged economically. There's lots of reporting and statistics around what is the economic upside of our participation, of our equitable participation. It's an and, it's not an or. On the funding side, 1.8% of global venture funding goes to women-led companies. It's actually gotten worse in the last couple of years. So the overall pot of money got bigger, but our percentages has gone down. Again, not complaining about that, just saying there's a huge opportunity if we can be writing checks to this portion of the population that's not getting funded. It's an overperforming, underinvested asset class. Additionally, we know that 11% of venture partners or partners in venture funds are women. Again, huge upside. So all of these statistics are about the opportunity. It's not about taking away from the existing system. The system actually seems to be functioning very, very well. We're just trying to add to it. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that, we're not saying, hey, let's do this because it's the right thing to do. It's nice to do. It's because the numbers are there. And so with our term sheets, we have two types of funds at the 51. We have what we call a feminist series fund, Fund 1 and Fund 2, where we largely target women's to write the checks, and we invest in women-led companies. And then we have another fund that we're raising, a food and ag tech fund. And that's where we're doubling down on deep science in that sector, which is really cool. Farm Credit Canada is our lead LP there. But we've expanded the mandate of that fund. So they don't need to be women-led or co-led companies, but we do want to see a commitment towards diversity, equity, and inclusion inside of those companies. So we're writing it right into our term sheets that we want to go on a journey with you to demonstrate that putting our capital to work with other capital, plus the human capital that's out there, you can build better performing companies. And so again, we're driving all of this from a point of data.
I love that. And yes, there's a business imperative for it, not just because it's the right thing to do. I think, we've talked a lot about attracting talent. How do you get people into the pipeline? How do you get them at a young age and attract them to your company? But then there's the flip side, which is how do you get them to stay? Especially when salaries are going crazy. I mean, we had an engineer who went to Product Hunt because he got offered $80,000 more. Well, I'm a startup. We're 20 people. I can't afford to pay you $80,000 more. In fact, I'm probably never going to win on salary. And so one thing that I've really struggled with is how do you build this total compensation plan and this culture that does retain people over time? So, Chris, I'd love to start with you. How are you creating that sense of loyalty, and how are you, what are some of the perks or the reasons that you think people are staying at AMD beyond the paycheck?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think as kind of leaders in tech companies, this is, if you hire the right people and retain the right people, everything else is easy, and so that is absolutely our focus, and it's getting more challenging, as we've alluded to. There's a lot of competition, whether it's startups. I mean, Toronto's a hotbed for new startups in AI and ML, and both on the software and the hardware side. For big incumbents, you really have to do a lot to, keep their attention and attract their attention. But I think it's what you said. It's a lot more than just raw compensation. I mean, we know that the brightest engineers are going to have opportunities. They may not even have to leave their home to take an opportunity south of the border or somewhere else overseas. So it's building a culture of getting the best and providing the best opportunities for somebody, understanding what it is that motivates each individual, and building a leadership team that has the skills to be able to work like on an individual level to tailor the experience for that person, for what's driving and motivating them, for knowing where they want to go, not just in the next year, but in the next 5 years, and finding them the opportunities and breaking down silos and barriers within the organization to make sure that they have those opportunities, so they know they can grow and they have a growth plan, a trajectory, and that they can get excited about to stay within the organization. And so that's something that we're passionate about. We have to be. It's incredibly competitive, and that goes both for attracting and retaining, and for keeping kind of employees that we have fully engaged and with us.
Yeah, it's really this idea that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. I remember I was at a conference in the benefits industry, and an employer was talking about the challenge that he had because he had 5 generations in his workforce. And what a 25-year-old employee cared about from a benefits perspective was very different from what a 65-year-old employee cared about. And so a lot of what it came down to was autonomy and flexibility around shaping your own kind of benefits experience. And you're right. If you ask 5 different employees, one of them will say money's the main motivator. Maybe they're saving for a house. They have a kid on the way, and someone else might say career growth. I just want to learn. I just want to soak up everything I can. So that idea of understanding that individual growth plan and individual motivators sounds really key. Nizar, anything you can share on that? I know you've also said you've had folks follow you. You've built and sold multiple companies. They've followed you from place to place. Why are they following you? Yeah. What are you doing right?
It's you build that culture and loyalty. When my last company was sold, was bought, it was about 130 people. 50% of that staff worked with me for 27 years. From one company to the other, we build that culture of innovating together. We certainly didn't pay the highest. I can tell you that we've got even fresh grads that other companies were paying $15K more, but we explain to them when he comes with us, he's going to get from here to here in the shortest path. So you build a career path, you build loyalty, you lead by example. We do have these co-op programs. I always brag about this. I have a boot camp program that I've been running for 8 years now in the company, and I'm continuing to do that. I take all the fresh grads, all the co-ops every Friday, and we discuss every topic. We discuss engineering topic, finance, legal, stuff that the company's facing. So what I was trying to do is bring all my 30 years experience into an hour session with staff. The grassroots is loyal. You're going to build that loyalty because they see they are learning so much with you, and they go, okay, you know what? Money is important too for all of us, but it's not important right now. It's the total package, as everybody said. So investing in individuals, investing in the senior guys, you have that loyalty, and you have to make them make decision and enable them. Every person is a CEO of his own in his own place. If you are in charge of a program, you're a CEO of that program. We give you the space. We give you the ability to grow, and that's the only bondage between us. It's people become loyal, and you look after them, they look after you. It's a very simple formula, but you have to be consistent, and you have to lead by example. If you say one thing and you do something else, people never believe in you, and they leave. But investing in the talent, and sometimes it's extremely hard for me to take an hour and a half every Friday, which is, by the way, next week when I'm going back. You pick a topic, and you explain things to people. And I now, even with COVID, I tell people, come in, bring a donuts, let's just do a whiteboard. And then I kind of see, okay, this person has a talent to lead. This person has, and we say, okay, maybe we should put you on this track because one day you're going to become the manager or the CEO, when I'm gone. So I think it's important to invest and expect no return other than they're going to be with you and they're going to build the ecosystem, and it brings back benefits to the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. an investment of time, not just an investment of money in talent. I think that's a great point. I do want to give everyone in the audience a chance to ask their burning questions. So I'll leave the panel with one final question for each of you, starting with Gordon. We touched on this a little bit, but hiring talent requires keeping talented people in Canada. How do we keep talent in Canada?
Well, people want to work for a company beyond the paycheck. They want to work for two reasons, right? One is they get to work with other smart, bright people that inspire them. And then they also want to work on exciting projects. And I think to keep people in Canada, we have to make sure that we have that local talent pool, which can inspire other people to do great work, as well as have those interesting projects that are breakthrough innovations that can change the face of technology. People want to work on those kind of projects. We have to make sure that those ventures are incubated locally, start up locally, and just make Toronto and Canada a center point for all of that new technology. So those are the two things I think we'd have to do.
Thanks, Gordon. And Shelley, I'll adjust the question a bit for you, which is how do we keep investment dollars in Canada and keep more investors in Canada, in addition to your thoughts on just talent?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I feel like we're still a very nascent industry on the investor side. Like I said before, 11% of venture capitalists are women, still early days. But there's another statistic that I think is really interesting, is 65% of the wealth in Canada will be in the hands of women by 2030. And so it's actually an imperative that women get involved in their financial journey, and what are they going to do with that wealth? And so, I can think of nothing more rewarding, as an entrepreneur and an early stage investor, having equity on an early stage company, building a successful company, having that liquidity of that equity at some point in time, and then turning around and, repaying that back into the ecosystem that helped you grow and build a company. And it becomes a bit of a flywheel and a very sustainable ecosystem. So, kind of going back to how do we keep talent in the country, I would say, we talked about the total compensation package. That equity component is so important. If we can actually build successful companies, that equity component on the cap table for individuals as employees far outweighs the money that we will be drawing out of that company in a salary. And so, if we can sell that overall package of let's build something together, you can share in the value that's being created, and then you in turn can turn around and help others build a successful company again. I think that's really the opportunity that Canada has to play, because we're just a very different society and economy than our US neighbors, right? So, yeah, I just think, again, there's so much economic upside by tapping in 51% of the population. As investors, we want to see different things in the world. We will fund different things. And then let's create this new equity on these cap tables, and let's build amazing companies, and let's turn around and let's help the next generation do it again.
I love that. I always tell my employees, you can't pay your rent with your stock options, but I hope there were something one day. Nizar, on to you.
Well, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I'm on the other side of the scale. I'm always trying something different every time, but equity is important. It's no secret, a lot of the people who work with us in the three companies, we've given a huge percentage of the company back to the staff. I mean, that's important for us because we go, you know what, this company is not built based on two founders. It's the team and where they go with it. And the numbers are much, much bigger than what investors do, 20%, 30%. It's much higher than that we've given back to the staff, because everybody needs to benefit from the hard work and sweat that they put in, and encourage people taking risk. Failure is, if it's failure just in terms of money, then of course, fail and success is measured if you make money or you don't make money. That's not the intention. I think we should encourage, we do have ability to innovate, and we have the best talent, we have smart people, but we do need to take more risk, and failures are okay. You start a company, I started my first company and I left a a very comfortable job in the Silicon Valley. I left and I came back and I said, I'm going to start and dump on it, dump everything I have and I'm going to go with it. But I didn't think of money. I thought of building a company. And guess what? You build it, it came. Success came with it. And then you encourage people to take risk. All the startups, take a risk. It's okay. Take a risk, take a chance, and focus on commercialization. It's extremely important. Cool technology doesn't mean you're gonna sell a lot. Commercialization, and I think in Canada we are weak in that. And we don't commercialize well. I think you look at it. Maybe I'm guilty just as well. I make it profitable and I sell it. But we do need to have a sustainable industry, and all of us have a duty to put money back into the system and encourage others to start companies. California started that way. It's the talent. Even after 2008, the money stayed in. And if you see, the next wave was even bigger because the money stayed in and they kept investing into the ecosystem.
I think that's one of my favorite things about the startup ecosystem is what Shelley mentioned about paying it forward. Every time you see a founder have a meaningful exit in Canada, their first order of business is to start a family office, is to write checks, is to be advising companies. And it's that return on investment that we'll get from successful founders that will really carry the ecosystem forward. And we've seen that even over the last 15 years. Last but not least, Chris, how do we keep talent in Canada?
Yeah, great question. I think it's, obviously a lot has been said, but I think I'll take my AMD hat off and put on the Team Canada jersey and talk about kind of building a community, right? And I mean, that community includes, big incumbents, global tech players that we, many of us represent here on the panel. It also includes startups. It includes academia. It includes, outreach into, various sectors at the, lower school levels. And I mean, if we build that environment for technology and great innovation here, we will attract the best companies in the world to open up and keep offices here. We will create the kind of breeding ground for new tech startups to grow from here and to attract and retain local talent. I mean, the walls are down. We used to worry about the brain drain with everybody up and packing up their stuff and moving to Silicon Valley or wherever. Now they don't even have to move. They can keep their apartment downtown and log in and work from here. So we need to be attracting people to the work that's being done by the companies that are situated here. And that's again, building a community. Events like this, organizations like Venture Lab do that. They bring people together from a diverse background because we know anybody who's been in this industry knows that people, they move depending on what's motivating them at a particular time in their career. They could look for something different from a big incumbent global tech player to something small, and so fostering that community, building those connections is all about what's going to keep this sector hot in Toronto and in Canada.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great shout out. Since we are approaching the end of the day here, to say thank you to Venture Lab for doing the great work to bring the hardware community together and to back so many great founders and keep the ecosystem going. Okay, we have time for one or two questions if we do have them. I know it's end of the day, so no pressure. Oh, hand up. Thank you, sir. It's always nice when you have someone who's eager.
So we've had a number of female entrepreneurs today, and it's very motivating. How do we motivate our daughters to get excited about engineering? These are always going to ask you, but
I failed.
So how were you motivated? How do we motivate our kids, our daughters, to get interested in engineering? Is it the feeder system that's failed? Because clearly the university is very, very good. How do you get them excited about it at a young age?
Well, and I would even flip the question on its head, which is, Nizar, why didn't they want to go in? What were the reasons for not wanting to go in?
The grassroots, the grade 6, 7, 8, all the way to 12. Physics is a hard subject to swallow. Math, I think they need to teach it differently to girls. I loved physics and math since I was a child. Even when I applied to university, I applied only to engineering school because I wanted to be an engineer. But I think and schools started to begin to do that. It's try to get girls to like physics and math and applied maths. I think they go into it and they don't do well in the first test or the second test, and my kids do test every month. And if they pull back, they go, okay, maybe this is no good for me, and that needs to change. I think the grassroots, it's not the engineering school. Once they get there, they are in the system. It's the early stage, for some reason now they favor biology, they favor chemistry. I used to hate chemistry, by the way, but biology seems more interesting to them. And I think we do need to change how we approach teaching girls subjects, so they love the subject, so they can be interested in getting into engineering, going to computer science, or
Shelley, looked like you were going to say something as well.
Yeah. I did 2 years of engineering and I dropped out. I hated it. But I think, what did I hate about it? It was like I was the only girl in the room.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a single woman teacher. So I think that needs to change as part of the system. And it is changing for sure. But I think I needed to see role models and go, oh, I too can do that. And so I think the whole environment really needs to change so that women are seeing the stories and hearing the stories and seeing the role models and learning from them, that they too, it's almost like you can't self-actualize if you can't see yourself being represented. So I think that really needs to change. And so there's so many amazing women engineers that have careers in engineering that have built phenomenal companies. We need to tell their stories. We need to tell their stories when they're in university, when they're in high school, when they're building a company, when they're working a leadership position in a large corporate. We just have to tell these stories, because I think we will be astounded. And we do this thing at the 51 sometimes where we search out different inventors. And we're like, did you know a woman invented? And we're like, okay, none of us knew that. We need to share these stories. So I just think it's just not pervasive information of the women that have had tremendous careers in science, engineering, math. So yeah, that's what I think needs to happen.
And I think the onus is on us as leaders here to make our successful women available to be role models, right? For Chris and I and Nizar, to make sure that our staff who are women who are successful are going into the schools, especially at that critical age in the grade 6 to 8, where I think a lot of women are choosing to stay away from engineering and moving into different careers. That's where we really need to be available. And so more of that visibility, that role modeling, I think is what we definitely need to do.
And I'll just say, having a woman CEO at the helm at AMD, I'm very supportive of any of you using Dr. Lisa Su as a role model. She is very active and engaged in this area at the national level in the U.S. and globally, and incredibly passionate. Again, with the AMD hat off, just about getting women engaged and involved. And working under a leader like that, I won't even say a woman leader. She's just an incredible leader, and from a very diverse background, and it's amazing to see that success, and we need to applaud that and make sure more people see it.
Love it. All great tips. We have another question. I don't know who had their hand up first. I think the gentleman at the back here. I don't believe that we need the mic anymore, but if you want it to amplify.
Sure. Tying into the subject you were just talking about, do you think there's anyone in the industry already doing a really good job of creating visible role models? Is there anywhere that our daughters can look that already exists for that inspiration, if they're already interested in the space, but don't necessarily have anyone to look up to?
One organization I really respect is Juneau College. It's founded by Heather Payne, used to be called HackerU, and it's an engineering and coding school. And Heather herself has been a really big role model for me in my career, but also just, I think, for if I was pointing my daughter anywhere, it would be to somewhere like Juneau College for her education, right? And not necessarily going to the scary, I'm the only woman in the room engineering programs at a university. Obviously, hopefully that changes by the time my daughter's 18, but Heather was also the founder of Ladies Learning Code, which is now Canada Learning Code. And so that room feels a lot more inclusive to walk into when you know it was founded by a woman with an ethos of more representation and getting diverse voices into engineering. So I have found her to be a role model. I'm not sure if anyone else has any tips on places to look from that respect. I would also say Barbie actually did a limited edition this year of Barbies representing amazing women across different fields. And Melissa, the CEO of Canada Learning Code, was made into a Barbie. And I thought that was a pretty cool example of, we're not buying our kid Malibu Barbie, we're buying them Learn to Code Barbie, and that's representation. Okay. We had one question over there, and then we'll come back to Alexandra, and then we'll have to wrap up so that we see who won the pitch competition. This gentleman over here.
I just had a question about when we talk about the acute challenges in the talent that you're facing. What are your thoughts about leveraging engineering services companies? And normally when we look at most of the bigger companies leveraging that, they have the procurement normally has a very short list of getting into these big companies. So, can you please throw some light about, if you would want to leverage these kind of engineering services companies?
Okay. Yeah, so at least for Intel, engineering services companies have always been sort of a smoothing function over whenever you have peaks and valleys in your talent. It's never really our primary focus. Like, we have a preference to build strong in-house talent, and we've always seen engineering services as a stopgap measure when you have a gap in your roadmap or you're trying to fill. So I'm not sure that's quite the solution for us. Like, we always do prefer to build that center of excellence in a geographic location, some talent that we can grow and invest in over time. So that's sort of where we stand on that.
Yeah, I have a different view on it, because I built 2 companies. We built our own chips. We sold chips on open market. We were competing with, at that time, Intel, Lucent, PMC Sierra. I think Peter probably sold so many licenses to us and to PMC at that time. My third company, we decided not to build chips, and we called ourselves solution providers. So we said, you know what, we're going to be different this time around. We did services. I didn't want to go and raise money for the third time. I just said, you know what, I'm going to do it solo. I built my own differentiated IP. There's Synopsys, there is Cadence, there is ARM, there is all these big players, and there are the small players. So I wanted to be differentiated. So I built a differentiated product. I looked and I got, you know what, I'm going to be in the solution subsystem level. So I'm one level up. And the service, I was very selective. I didn't go across everybody. I picked 4 customers, and I said, I'm going to focus on these 4 customers, and I'm going to be part of their fabric. I am not going to be an augmented. I refuse to be an augmented company. I wanted to be a domain-specific provider to that company, and I became an embedded fabric of that company. And essentially, I built a value. I provided a value. No matter what, a downturn or an upturn, the customer will always come back to you, and I over-delivered. You have to be differentiated and over-deliver to the customer, and deliver no matter how trivial is the task. You build that differentiated model, you're always going to be successful and make money.
Thank you, Nizar, and thank you for the questions. Alexandra, I'm sorry, we have to get to the announcement of the winners, which I know you have a vested interest in. And I know that our panelists will be at the networking section as well. So if you have any additional questions to direct, I want to say thank you to Gordon, to Shelley, to Nizar, to Chris for joining us, and to all of you for staying through to the end of the day. And one more round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Technology changes the world, but not on its own. Hardware needs heart. Software needs soul. When we match compute power to instinct and acceleration to imagination, tomorrow comes alive. We make processing powerful and computing adaptive. to inspire great leaps, fight new battles, and ignite AI. For us, it's not what we achieve alone, but sharing a vision to solve the world's most important challenges. Because together, anything is possible. AMD, together we advance.